The message arrived on Ambassador Ilera Vance's personal terminal with a soft chime that belied its urgency. Encrypted, marked with the highest priority clearance, and bearing the seal of the Galactic Council. She sighed, running a hand through her short salt and pepper hair. 5 years since the Hive War had ended, and still every Council communication carried the subtle undertone of suspicion and barely concealed fear. Vance accessed the message, her eyes quickly scanning the carefully worded summons. An emergency session, closed door, regarding an anomalous phenomenon detected near the shared border of human and Drakari space. The Council's language was measured, clinical, but Vance had spent nearly 2 decades in diplomatic service. She could read between the lines. They were scared, and worse, they were attempting to take control of the situation while minimizing direct Deathworlder involvement. "Damn fools," she muttered, reaching for her comm unit. It took only moments to establish a secure connection to her counterpart. When a massive, scaled visage of Ambassador Forlag appeared on her screen, Vance didn't bother with diplomatic pleasantries. "Have you received the Council's summons?" The Drakari ambassador's reptilian features shifted in what Vance had long ago learned to recognize as amusement. At over 7 feet tall, with armored hide, iridescent scales, and prominent cranial ridges, Forlag cut an intimidating figure even through a holographic projection. "Indeed, Ambassador Vance." Their wording was cautious. "Too cautious," Vance replied. "Our border patrols have been detecting strange readings from that sector for weeks. I assume the Drakari hegemony has observed the same." Forlag's eyes, vertical slits of amber against obsidian, narrowed slightly. "We have. 3 scout vessels disappeared while investigating. No distress signals, no wreckage. Simply gone." His clawed hand made a dismissive gesture. "The Council's data will be sanitized, incomplete. They believe themselves wise enough to handle a threat they cannot even comprehend. Classic Council thinking. Analyze, categorize, contain, all without ever truly understanding the nature of what they're dealing with." Vance pulled up her own classified intelligence reports on a secondary screen. "We lost a stealth reconnaissance drone 2 days ago. Before it went dark, it transmitted data suggesting localized reality distortion, non-Euclidean geometry, energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. The hegemony's findings are similar," Forlag confirmed. "And yet the Council wishes to handle this with their standard protocols and their peaceful exploration teams." The Drakari let out a sound that might have been a laugh on his home world, a rumbling growl that revealed rows of serrated teeth. They never learn. Vance felt a familiar camaraderie with the Drakari ambassador. Despite their species' vastly different biologies and histories, they shared a fundamental perspective that the Council races could never truly understand. Humans and Drakari had evolved on worlds that actively tried to kill them every day, worlds the Council had classified as death worlds due to their extreme conditions and aggressive biospheres. That shared evolutionary heritage created a mindset the sheltered Council species found alien and disturbing. A willingness to confront threats directly, to make hard choices, to prioritize survival above all. "We need to coordinate our approach," Vance said. "The Council will attempt to sideline us, treat us as consultants at best, while they fumble with a threat they're fundamentally unprepared to face." Forlag's expression grew serious, the membrane on his inner eyelid flickering momentarily. "Agreed. My government has authorized me to share our intelligence findings if necessary. The Supreme Commander believes this anomaly represents a potential extinction-level threat." Vance raised an eyebrow. "That's serious?" "The Drakari do not use such terms lightly, Ambassador." "Nor do we," Vance replied. She tapped a few commands into her terminal. "I'm sending you our preliminary threat assessment. Encrypted eyes only. Review it before the meeting." "I shall do the same." Forlag paused, his head tilting slightly in a gesture Vance recognized as contemplative. "Do you believe the Council will listen?" Vance's mouth curved into a grim smile. "Probably not, but they'll have no choice but to act once we present our evidence. Then we shall make them listen." Forlag's massive hand formed what Vance recognized as the Drakari salute of respect. Claws extended but palm exposed, signifying deadly capability held in check by reason. Until tomorrow, Ambassador. The communication ended, and Vance leaned back at her chair, staring at the stars visible through the viewport of her quarters on Harmony Station. Out there, in the darkness between those distant points of light, something waited. Something that defied conventional understanding, something that consumed ships without a trace. And the Galactic Council, with all its bureaucracy and peaceful intentions, was thoroughly unprepared to face it. The council chamber was a marvel of galactic architecture, a vast circular room with soaring crystal columns and a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time holographic map of the galaxy. Tiered seating surrounded a central speaking platform, designed to accommodate the diverse physiologies of the council's member species. The chamber's aesthetic beauty, however, did nothing to dispel the tension that permeated the air as Vance and Forlag entered. Conversations hushed. Appendages stiffened. Several delegates from more sensitive species visibly recoiled as the two Deathworlders made their way toward their designated positions. Vance had long since learned to ignore such reactions, though she never quite became immune to them. High Counselor Thrix, a cerulean from Azura Prime with delicate, translucent skin and 4 upper limbs that moved with deliberate grace, addressed the chamber. This emergency session is now in session. As you are aware, we have detected an anomalous phenomenon in Sector 87 Delta, near the outer boundaries of explored space. The central holographic display shifted from the galaxy map to a 3-dimensional representation of the anomaly, or at least, what little data they had managed to gather. To Vance, it looked like a wound in space, a distortion that somehow hurt her eyes to look at directly. Security Commander Krell will brief us on the current situation, Thrix continued, gesturing to a stocky, gray-skinned humanoid whose species had evolved from burrowing creatures. The Tower were known for their conservatism and rigid adherence to protocol. Commander Krell stepped forward, his small eyes darting briefly toward the Deathworlder delegates with poorly concealed suspicion. The anomaly was first detected 17 standard cycles ago by an automated observatory platform. Initial readings suggested a localized gravitational disturbance, possibly natural in origin. However, subsequent investigations have revealed irregularities. The hologram zoomed in, showing the movement patterns of the distortion. Vance exchanged a glance with Forlag. The Council's data was indeed sanitized, showing only the most basic characteristics of the phenomenon. 3 research vessels were dispatched to investigate, Krell continued. Only one has returned. The others, he paused, clearly uncomfortable. The others vanished without trace. No debris field, no emergency signals. The surviving vessel recorded energy readings of unknown type and spatial distortions that defy our current understanding of physics. A willowy, plant-like being, Dr. Nihilus, the Council's leading xenobiologist, rose from her seat. Her voice rustled like leaves in a gentle breeze. The phenomenon exhibits characteristics suggesting it may not be entirely natural. There are patterns that indicate adaptation, response to stimuli. The possibility that we are dealing with a previously unencountered form of life cannot be dismissed. Vance noted the careful language, the hedging. The Council species were masters of understatement when faced with the terrifying unknown. High Counselor Thrix folded 2 of her 4 hands in a gesture of grave concern. After much deliberation, the Council proposes the formation of a scientific expedition to investigate this anomaly further. We have designed a mission protocol emphasizing caution and non-confrontational observation, utilizing our most advanced scanning technologies. The mission will be staffed by specialists from various Council worlds, operating under strict safety parameters. Vance didn't need to look at Forlag to know the Drakari ambassador was as incredulous as she was. The Council was proposing to send more researchers, effectively more prey, to whatever was consuming ships at the border. With respect, High Counselor, Vance interjected, rising to her feet. I note that this proposal makes no mention of human or Drakari involvement, despite the anomaly's proximity to our territories. Commander Krell's expression hardened. The mission requires a measured, scientific approach. Given humanity's and the Dracaris' historical tendencies toward militarization of first contacts, the Security Council felt it prudent to maintain a purely research-oriented composition. Vance felt her diplomatic mask slipping. You mean you want to exclude the only species in this room evolved to effectively respond to existential threats? Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Forlag rose next to her, his massive form casting a shadow across the council floor. The Dracari hegemony objects to this exclusion in the strongest possible terms. This is not merely a matter of protocol or politics. It is a matter of survival. Survival seems a rather extreme characterization, Dr. Nihilus replied, her leafy appendages fluttering nervously. We have no conclusive evidence that the anomaly poses an imminent threat to the wider galaxy. Forlag's chuckle with a rumbling sound that sent visible shivers through the more sensitive delegates. No evidence? Tell that to the crews of the missing vessels. What Ambassador Forlag means, Vance interceded, trying to steer the conversation back to diplomacy, is that both our species have evolved specifically to recognize and respond to environmental dangers. Our neural architecture, our stress responses, our threat assessment capabilities, they're all adapted to identify risks that other species might miss. Commander Krell's lip curled slightly. What you call threat assessment, Ambassador Vance, others might call paranoia and aggression. The Council has procedures for handling unknown phenomena. Your procedures, Forlag interrupted, are designed for peaceful encounters with known parameters. This situation exists outside those parameters. The Dracari ambassador is correct, Vance added. And I must point out that your data presentation is incomplete. You've omitted critical information about the anomaly's behavior patterns. High Counselor Thrix's iridescent skin flushed a deeper blue, a sign of discomfort among her species. Ambassador Vance, I assure you, all relevant data has been shared with this assembly. Then perhaps we should compare notes, Vance replied, her voice hardening as she realized the council was being even more obstructive than she'd anticipated. She exchanged a glance with Forlag, receiving an almost imperceptible nod of agreement. It was time to abandon diplomatic niceties. The Human Alliance and the Dracari hegemony have been conducting our own observations of this phenomenon, Vance announced, pulling a data crystal from her pocket and inserting it into the chamber's projector terminal. Unlike the Council, we deployed stealth reconnaissance assets with advanced sensory capabilities specifically designed to operate in hostile environments. The chamber's holographic display flickered as it processed the new data. Commander Krell started to object, but his words died as the image resolved into a far more detailed and far more disturbing visualization of the anomaly. Where the Council's imagery had shown a vague distortion, the Deathworlder data revealed complex, almost organic patterns of energy tendrils extending outward from a central void. The tendrils moved with purpose, reaching, probing, hunting. This is live data from a stealth drone positioned at the outer perimeter of the anomaly's current range, Vance explained, her voice clinically detached as she presented what effectively amounted to nightmare fuel to the assembly. Note the adaptive behavior. The energy patterns are not random. They're searching, learning, hunting. Forlag stepped forward, his clawed hand gesturing toward specific movement patterns in the hologram. The anomaly doesn't merely exist in space, it consumes it. Our sensors have detected localized alterations in the very fabric of space-time. When it encounters a vessel, it doesn't destroy it conventionally. It digests it, absorbs it into itself, restructuring the component atoms and the space they occupy. The chamber had fallen deathly silent. The casual confidence that had marked the council delegates' demeanor just minutes earlier had evaporated, replaced by the primitive fear that all sentient beings feel when confronted with the truly alien. How did you gather this data? Dr. Nihilus finally asked, her voice barely audible. Our most advanced sensors couldn't penetrate the outer boundary of the phenomenon. Vance and Forlag exchanged another glance. and the Drakari gave a gesture that in his culture signified deference to an ally's expertise. Because your sensors aren't designed with survival as their primary parameter, Vance explained. Earth evolved predators that can detect the electrical signals of a beating heart, that can sense the heat signature of a body from kilometers away, that can smell a single drop of blood in an ocean. We've incorporated those principles into our reconnaissance technology. She manipulated the controls, zooming in on one section of the anomaly. Here, we can see how it responded when it detected our drone. Rather than immediately attacking, it sent these smaller tendrils, think of them as sensory organs, to investigate. The drone was programmed to mimic the energy signature of interstellar background radiation, effectively playing dead. The anomaly lost interest and moved on. Predator avoidance tactics, Forlag added. A fundamental survival skill on Drakari Prime, where apex predators can sense neural electrical activity. Our young are taught from hatching to control their bioelectrical emissions to avoid detection. Commander Krell's face had lost its confrontational edge, replaced by a growing horror. You're suggesting this thing is hunting. Consciously. We're not suggesting it, Forlag replied, his voice a low rumble. We are stating it as fact, based on observable evidence. This entity, and yes, we believe it is an entity rather than a phenomenon, displays all the characteristics of an apex predator. It hunts. It learns. It adapts. Vance nodded in agreement. And it's becoming more efficient. Compare these attack patterns from 2 weeks ago to the most recent data. She split the holographic display, showing a clear evolution in the entity's hunting strategy. It's learning from each encounter, becoming more precise, conserving energy, maximizing its consumption rate. But what is it? Asked a delegate from one of the council's younger member species, a luminar whose bioluminescent skin was currently dimmed to a dull glow of fear. That, said Forlag, is the question that matters less than you think. The comment drew confused looks from around the chamber. Vance stepped in to explain. On Earth, if you're lost in the wilderness and see a large predator approaching, you don't stop to classify its genus and species. You assess the threat and respond accordingly. Is it showing hunting behavior? Can I outrun it? Should I hide, fight, or try to scare it off? Precisely, Forlag agreed. Survival first. Classification later. High Counselor Thrix had regained some of her composure, though her skin still pulsed with stress colors. If what you say is true, how do you propose we respond to this? Entity. Vance took a deep breath. This was the moment where the true gulf between Deathworlders and Council species would become apparent. Before we answer that, there's more you need to see. She manipulated the controls again, and the hologram shifted to display a complex simulation model. This is a predictive analysis based on the entity's current growth rate, energy consumption patterns, and movement trajectory. The simulation showed the anomaly expanding, its tendrils reaching further into inhabited space, consuming everything in its path, starships, stations, eventually entire star systems. At current growth rates, it will reach the nearest populated system within 60 standard days, Vance stated flatly. Within 1 year, it could potentially consume an entire sector. The chamber erupted in panicked exclamations. Several delegates were calling for order, others demanding verification of the data. Commander Krell was shouting something about fear-mongering. The High Counselor's attempts to restore calm went unheeded. Forlag's powerful voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Silence. The chamber fell quiet, more out of shock at the Drakari's commanding tone than any respect for protocol. You fear the wrong thing, Forlag continued, his voice dropping to a dangerously low register. You fear the entity, yes, but more than that, you fear what must be done to stop it. You fear the necessary action because you have luxury of evolving in safe worlds. Vance picked up the thread. Both humans and Drakari come from worlds where hesitation means death, where predators don't negotiate and nature doesn't compromise. We've been shaped by environments that killed any member of our species who didn't react decisively to threats. High Counselor Thrix found her voice again. What exactly are you proposing, ambassadors? Vance looked at Forlag, who gave a subtle nod. They had discussed this moment in private before the meeting, the moment when they would have to reveal capabilities that the Council races weren't supposed to know existed. The Human Alliance has been developing contingencies for extra-dimensional and reality-altering threats since our first encounters with anomalous physics during early space exploration, Vance began. We have protocols classified so deeply that most of our own government doesn't know they exist. She pressed a small device on her wrist communicator, entering an authorization code that would allow her to access files that technically she shouldn't even acknowledge. I am now showing you a heavily redacted summary of Operation Hurricane I, she said as new data appeared in the holographic display. The file showed theoretical models of spatial containment fields, reality anchors, and weapons systems designed specifically to combat threats that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Beside her, Forlag was accessing his own classified files. The Drakari hegemony has faced similar threats in our history, albeit on a smaller scale. 3 centuries ago, a research station in the Morith system accidentally opened a rift to somewhere else. Something came through. The display split, now showing Drakari tactical simulations. The imagery was alien but unmistakably military. Precision strikes, containment protocols, weapon platforms unlike anything the Council had seen before. We lost an entire moon, Forlag continued, his voice devoid of emotion. 17 million Drakari. But we contained it using these methods. The records were sealed by the Supreme Command, the technology locked away for use only in extinction-level scenarios. The Council delegates stared in horror, not just at the devastating potential of the anomaly, but the equally terrifying revelation of what the Deathworlder species were capable of and had been concealing. You've been developing weapons systems in violation of Treaty Resolution 455, Commander Krell finally sputtered, though his accusation lacked conviction. Vance's laugh was short and bitter. Resolution 455 prohibits weapons of mass destruction designed for use against sentient galactic species. These aren't weapons of war, Commander. They're survival tools designed for threats exactly like the one we're facing. Threats the Council's peaceful exploration doctrine is utterly unprepared to handle. What you're suggesting, began Dr. Nihilus, but Forlag cut her off. What we are suggesting is the only viable response, the Drakari ambassador stated flatly. The entity must be contained, studied from safe distance, and if containment fails, destroyed by any means necessary. By any means? A Luminar delegate gasped. Including targeted stellar excitation, Vance confirmed. If necessary, we would trigger a controlled nova in an uninhabited star system to generate enough energy to disrupt the entity's cohesion. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. The Council species had long considered themselves the enlightened shepherds of galactic civilization, guiding the more primitive and aggressive species like humans and Drakari toward a more peaceful existence. Now they were faced with the uncomfortable reality that these Deathworlders had been developing capabilities far beyond what the Council had imagined. And worse, that those capabilities might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and annihilation. High Counselor Thrix's skin had paled to an almost white blue. You would destroy an entire star to save 1,000 others? Without hesitation, Forlag replied. His massive clawed hand moved over the holographic controls, bringing up a tactical simulation. But that is a last resort. Our primary strategy would involve a multi-phase containment operation. The simulation showed specialized ships deploying a network of devices around the anomaly, generating a containment field that would prevent its expansion while more permanent solutions were studied. The entity feeds on energy and matter, Vance explained. These containment platforms would create a negative energy barrier, essentially a desert zone where there's nothing for it to consume. Meanwhile, Forlag continued, we would deploy modified long-range sensors to study it safely, while preparing more permanent containment or neutralization options. Commander Krell had recovered enough to voice objections. This is preposterous. You're asking the Council to authorize a military operation based on your own unverified data, using classified weapons technology that violates multiple treaty provisions. No, Commander, Vance interrupted, her patience finally exhausted. We're not asking. We're informing you of what must be done. This entity will not respect diplomatic niceties or council procedures. It will not wait while committees debate and subcommittees analyze. It will consume and grow and adapt until it's too large to stop. She took a step forward, her voice dropping to a deadly serious tone. The Human Alliance and the Drakari hegemony have already begun mobilizing our response forces. We're prepared to act with or without council approval, because the alternative is extinction. This is outrageous. Krell sputtered. You can't simply. We can and we will, Forlag growled, his massive form seeming to expand with the force of his conviction. This is not a negotiation. This is survival. The Drakari ambassador manipulated the controls one final time, bringing up a tactical overlay that showed human and Drakari fleet movements already in progress. Ships being repositioned, specialized equipment being transported to the border of the anomaly zone. But, Vance added, her voice softening slightly, we would prefer to do this with the Council's cooperation. A joint operation would be more effective, drawing on the strengths of all our species. The Council races have scientific and analytical capabilities that could prove invaluable. High Counselor Thrix looked from a human ambassador to the Drakari and back again, clearly recognizing the implicit threat behind their words. If the Council refused to cooperate, the Deathworlders would act unilaterally, and who knew what precedent that might set for future crises. What exactly are you proposing? She asked carefully. Vance met her gaze steadily. A joint task force. Human and Drakari ships provide the primary containment and, if necessary, neutralization capabilities. Council scientific teams provide analysis and assistance in understanding the entity. Full information sharing between all parties. Under whose command? Commander Krell demanded, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Joint command, Forlag replied. One human, one Drakari, and one council representative forming a triumvirate. But his eyes narrowed, with operational decisions defaulting to Deathworlder authority in time-critical situations. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. What the ambassadors were proposing was unprecedented, a tacit admission that in certain types of crises, the Deathworlders' approach was not just valid but necessary. High Counselor Thrix looked around the chamber, taking in the shocked, fearful faces of her fellow council members. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of terrible responsibility. I move that we put Ambassador Vance and Ambassador Forlag's proposal to an immediate vote. The voting process was brief and, to Vance's mild surprise, unanimous. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the council species, for all their philosophical advancement and cultural sophistication, were still biological beings with the innate drive to survive. As the formal session concluded, Vance and Forlag made their way toward the chamber's exit. The other delegates parted before them like water, maintaining a distance that had nothing to do with courtesy and everything to do with primal fear. That went better than expected, Vance murmured to her Drakari counterpart as they walked. Forlag's mouth curled in what passed for a smile among his kind. Fear is an excellent teacher. Perhaps now they will begin to understand what it means to evolve on a world that actively tries to kill you every day. Understanding may be too much to hope for, Vance replied, casting a glance back at the chamber they were leaving. The delegates had gathered in tight clusters, their body language screaming distress and uncertainty. But respect will do for now. As the massive doors closed behind them, sealing the council in with their newfound terrors, Forlag made a sound deep in his throat, a Drakari expression of grim satisfaction. They fear us now more than ever, he observed. Yes, Vance agreed. But they need us too. That's a start. Together, the two Deathworlders strode down the gleaming corridor, their shadows stretching long behind them. Two apex predators united by the understanding that in a dangerous universe, survival sometimes required monsters of your own. Behind them, in the council chamber, The delegates of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations looked at one another with new eyes, united not by shared ideals or common purpose, but by the cold, creeping realization that they had just handed unprecedented power to species they barely understood and deeply feared. Species shaped by worlds of death, whose minds worked in ways the council races could scarcely comprehend. Species who could casually discuss destroying stars and creating weapons that bent reality itself. And yet, what choice did they have? The entity lurking at the edge of known space cared nothing for their peaceful philosophies or their diplomatic protocols. In the face of such a threat, perhaps only monsters could save them. It was a deeply uncomfortable thought, and one that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The day two Deathworlders walked into a council meeting and left everyone terrified, not of the threat beyond the stars, but of the allies they so desperately needed.